Good morning, welcome to G20 Innovation League. This is an important day because today we are changing something. We are starting to build something new also in G20. G20 has always been an institutional event where all institutions participate. Today we are in a different period, and we are in the middle of what people generally call the fourth industrial revolution, but we understood with pandemic it's not only an industrial revolution, this is a human revolution. After Copernicus, after Darwin, after Freud, who changed the way people perceived humans, Alan Turing, with the fourth revolution, which is the internet revolution and artificial intelligence revolution, let us understood that we are not the only agents in the world. It means that if someone from somewhere else, some other planets, would like to get in contact with the most agents in Earth, they would contact connected objects, connected plants, connected animals, but objects who are very much more than us, humans, and who talk each other without man in the middle. This is a very important revolution because it forces us as humans to rebuild the ecosystem and to rebuild the ecosystem between private and public accords. The SDGs are our purpose and our focus, and we can't have only institutions to participate and to decide. That's why today we have many actors on our stage, and that's why today we have startups and young people in G20 events. We have 248 participants from 30 countries. Startups are 89. In presence, we have 56. Venture capitalists are 67, and the corporates are 21. So this is a very important start and very important step for rebuilding this ecosystem after pandemic. It is a real challenge, and we are a unique generation, 3 or 4 generations maybe, who have the opportunity to build the roads in this moment between analogic and digital era. And digital era who is leading us to a complex system where the actors are private and public, young and aged people, and we have to build all together. That's why we are so many from so many countries, a new world. I invite for the starting our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Luigi Di Maio, on stage. Welcome.
Dear all, I'm honored to open this first edition of the G20 Innovation League. I thank all the international participants who have joined us today in Sorrento. Let me thank in particular Mr. Angel Gurria, dear friend, and the CEO of the Dubai Future Foundation, Kalfan Belul. I'm sure your active involvement will boost the global innovation agenda. We are honored to have you here. Thank you very much for your presence here. I also congratulate CDP Venture Capital, the Italian Trade Agency, and CIMEST for their support in organizing this event. The outbreak of COVID-19 has affected our daily life and has worsened long-standing systemic trends from climate change to inequality. The pandemic has also highlighted how fast in a complex and interconnected world local gaps can evolve into global challenges. To tackle them effectively, we need new, holistic and multi-stakeholder approaches. This is the spirit of the Innovation League. For the first time, the G20 is providing a platform where startups, investors, corporates and policymakers can come together to devise and discuss solutions to some of the most urgent needs of our societies. This is also a unique opportunity to increase the international flow of market-based investments of innovation. Italy aims at reinforcing its role as a global driver of innovation. With our National Recovery and Resilience Plan, we want to achieve a fairer, greener, more digitalized and inclusive society and to foster a competitive, dynamic and cutting-edge economy. To accelerate these transitions, we launched in 2020 the National Innovation Fund, CDP Venture Capital Fund, thus making the venture capital system a cornerstone of Italy's economic development. The fund, which can support startups at all stages of their life cycle, is experiencing a remarkable response in the framework of an overall growth of the venture capital market. Despite the pandemic, in fact, the total volume of venture capital funds invested in our country have reached 778 million euros in the first semester 2021 only, while in the entire 2020 they amounted to 595 million euros. Economic diplomacy is a priority for Italy, featuring among the key missions of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. In response to the impact of the pandemic and in view of the recovery, we designed a new comprehensive strategy in support of our company's efforts to compete on the global markets. This strategy is conceived as a pact between the public and the private sector and focuses precisely on digital transition, technology and innovation, giving special attention to the promotion of Italian small and medium enterprises. With an overall amount of 300 billion euros, the performance of Italian exports in the first 7 months of 2021 has surpassed the figures of 2019, that is considered the record year for Italian export. The positive outlook of our GDP for the current year, which is expected to grow by 6%, confirms that we have chosen the right path. In pursuing it, we are relying more and more on our innovation ecosystem. We are convinced that the contamination between traditional productive value chains and innovative solutions is the key to deliver better, safer, more sustainable and equitable growth. This is why, in addition to the G20 Innovation League, we launched, together with the Italian Trade Agency, the Global Startup Program. It helps 150 Italian startups to increase the business opportunities abroad through concrete collaboration with international incubators. The same spirit inspired us in promoting the first Italian Innovation and Cultural Hub that I'm going to inaugurate in the upcoming weeks in the iconic city of San Francisco. All these initiatives will provide an additional boost to the Italian startups ecosystem, which has already showed its dynamism and resilience during the pandemic and which counts today over thousands of thriving teams and companies. Their number has continued to grow during the last 2 years, with an increase of over 8% in 2020 compared to 2019, and over an additional 14% in the first 6 months of 2021. In light of these considerations and as a contribution to our efforts for a better recovery, we hope this special event will provide a remarkable future to the G20 activities in the years to come. Before concluding my remarks, I therefore wish to thank the Indonesian government for its willingness to host the second edition of this event during their G20 presidency next year in 2022. We have worked during the last weeks to ensure that our exercise would be enriched and reinforced during 2022. Without anticipating the contents of today's final session, I would like to thank Mr. Samuel Panjarapan, Director General of Informatics Applications of the Ministry of Communication and Informatics of the Republic of Indonesia, for the continuous cooperation, and I am sure we will have the chance to meet again in Indonesia. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, today we have the opportunity to outline and share innovative ideas on 5 selected areas: clean tech, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things and wearables, smart cities and mobility, healthcare. Your generous engagement shows us that the time is ripe for governments, companies, investors, and research communities to join forces and shape together a global innovation agenda for the post-COVID world. To reach these ambitious goals, you can count on the talent and fresh mindset of thousands of Italian startups, innovators, and researchers, as well as on those of their outstanding colleagues from all over the G20 and invited countries. I wish all of you a very productive working day. Thank you very much.
As during this fourth revolution, we are able to detach things that we always thought together and not shareable. We, for example, have the split between presence and localization. We here are localized here in this room in Sorrento, but we are in presence from all over the world through the internet. So we have in presence, but not localized here, our second speaker, who is the Minister for Technological Innovation and Digital Transition of the Italian Republic, Vittorio Colau.
Hello. I'm really honored to participate in today's event, and I have to say I very much regret being unable to attend in person. I have to say in my current role I really miss the energy and the entrepreneurial spirit of startups. This would have been a great opportunity, but unfortunately I cannot make it. Let me start first of all by thanking Minister Di Maio, Luigi, for having supported this unique opportunity for exchanging inspiring ideas and discussing forward-looking projects from all over the world. I also would like most sincerely to congratulate all the participants to this global competition. As I was saying, your creativity, your sense of entrepreneurship, your long-term vision, but I would say most importantly, your courage to experiment, I think are very important today, and they can make an essential contribution to things that are very, very important to all governments in these days. First of all, strengthening the culture of innovation, which we need because we are in uncertain times. Second, to support long-term economic growth and resilience, which again we need in order to come out healthily from the pandemic. And third, not to be forgotten, also to overcome the social, economic, environmental, and legal challenges that technology progress always poses. Let me also say that the 5 challenges that you are trying to overcome are particularly important. I would like to go through them briefly. First of all, innovative clean tech solutions are really urgently needed to accelerate the energy transition and to match global supply and demand in the most efficient and sustainable way. It's very important. Think of, for example, of the semiconductor shortage that we are facing today and all the consequences that these will have. Second, ongoing advances in artificial intelligence have shown impressive results from business to government, but we need further efforts to make AI-related projects and services more robust, more accurate, and more sustainable. We need to tackle issues like bias, we need to tackle model uncertainties, unexpected outcomes. All these things have to find a solution in your technological innovation. Third, we know that 75 billion devices are expected to be connected to the internet by 2025. The Internet of Things will require advancements in two areas, at least in my view. One is, of course, security. There's a huge amount of innovation there. And the other one is standardization across different jurisdictions. If we solve these two challenges, then the potential of IoT is truly, truly massive. Fourth, with smart cities and mobilities, we face the opportunity to deliver more efficient, sustainable, and inclusive urban environments. This requires you, us and you, to reimagine the way we live in our homes, in our neighborhoods, our commuting habits, our working patterns. So there will be a massive transformation in that area as well. And finally, an area that is very dear to me, healthcare. Here we are confronted by two enormous opportunities. First of all, to strengthen international collaboration in developing data standards and interoperability specifications, but also to invest in digital skills for our citizens, to improve the medical services to them, and to allow them to have all the benefits coming from telemedicine and from e-health. So if I have to conclude my remarks, I really have three messages. First and foremost, we need constant cooperation between the public and the private sector. And when I say private sector, I really mean the very large companies, but also startups and small enterprises, because this would be fundamental to really have a thriving and stimulating ecosystem of innovation. Second message, we also need, and this is more for us, to enhance the cooperation across governments and also within the national administrations, public administrations, to let knowledge, best practices, innovative ideas flourish and support each other. And then third, the message which is frankly more focused to innovators and experimentators. Experimentation will be very important, and creativity also. They will be, I think, the crucial means for modernizing our governments, our societies, and our political systems, and to create more trust between the citizens and those who are elected to represent them. And here again, smart solutions can really be, I think, a very, very important tool to that end. So once again, I wish to express my gratitude for this event, my appreciation for your work, and my trust that your contributions and the contributions of your ideas and projects will make all of us more informed, richer, and better equipped to do our job. So I wish you a productive and fruitful discussion, and again, I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you to Minister of Innovation Vittorio Colao, and now on stage it's the moment of the President of the Italian Trade Agency, Carlo Ferro.
Good morning, everyone. Honorable Minister Luigi Di Maio, Mr. José Ángel Gurria, it's really a pleasure to meet all the distinguished guests and participants today at this G20 Innovation League, which is an important occasion to discuss innovation and new ideas. Doing it in Sorrento is a sign how Italy and the beauty of landscape fertilizes the minds. From Renato Dulbecco to Ettore Majorana, Region Campania gave birth to innovative scientists. And the Italian ecosystem is a crib to nurture technology transfer into new business proposal. I don't want to mention many numbers. Let me share only two data. Italy is the European country with the highest number of scientific publications, and the number of startups in Italy grew even during 2020, reaching 12,000 at the beginning of the year. Creativity is contagious. Pass it. This is a quote by Albert Einstein, and I think that G20 Innovation League is an arena to follow this advice. Indeed, innovation asks for openness and cooperation, and in a world more and more web-connected, only in a spirit of international cooperation, clearly within respect of intellectual properties, we can enhance technology development for economies and societies. New cross-border partnerships, business synergies within global value chain, and venture capital cross-border investment will certainly help to address the two transitions, digital and ecological, which the pandemic make even more urgent. Clean tech, artificial intelligence, IoT, smart cities and mobility, healthcare, the 5 challenges which today's contest focuses on are of the utmost importance to achieve this goal. And the goal is to expand the boundaries of these ecosystems. I'm glad that the Italian Trade Agency, under the coordination of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has been part of this initiative in its conceptions and organization for 4 reasons. First of all, it's our mission, connecting dots for business cross-border. Second, I believe that innovation and export are of mutual benefit in a virtuous circle where innovation fuel export, export grow revenues, consolidating new enterprises, and financing more innovation, and so on, so far. Third reason, this is an opportunity to contribute to the inclusion by gender and by generation. The talent, the energy, the vision of change of young generation and women cannot be left behind, not only as a social duty, but as an opportunity not to miss such essential contribution to new ideas and new business models. Number 4, it fits with our strategic focus on small enterprises and startups. Inspired by the Honorable Minister Di Maio, we want to accompany more small enterprises to the success in foreign markets. At this purpose, the Italian trade agencies has multiplied by a factor of 3 the budget dedicated to startup through 6 new dedicated actions. The Global Startup Program, bringing every year over 100 innovative startups to accelerate for 8 weeks in accelerators abroad in order to tailor their business proposition to a foreign market and to scale up with new business partnership and new financing. We ran already 2 rounds of that program, and here I want to mention the one with the Dubai Future Foundation and to thank His Excellencies Khalfan Belul. And just this week, we have announced the first initiative of the 3rd round, the one for 2022. The Startup Corner, another initiative dedicated to emerging players, put in the heart of the main international affairs in Italy, in each vertical chain to offer to startup higher visibility. The extended presence from Italy, organized and sponsored by the Italian Trade Agency at the big events for startup. And I look forward at meeting many of you at Consumer Electronics Show, at Mobile World Congress, at Viva Technology, to mention a few for the next year. Our cooperation with foreign accelerators extends into Italy, where new accelerators are establishing as a joint initiative between the foreign accelerators, CDP equity, regions, leading Italian industrial players, and the Italian Trade Agency. And in this respect, let me mention the Motor Valley Accelerator, already active on the emerging technologies for clean and connected vehicles. The fifth is our effort going abroad. And next to come will be the Italian Innovation and Culture Hub in San Francisco, which will open by the end of this year. And finally, the occasion of this G20 and the participation of the Italian Trade Agency among the organizers of G20 Innovation League. Here, I wanted to ensure the availability of the Italian Trade Agency to support the legacy of this event, like the format, the web platform, whatever could be instrumental to continue its organizations. And our experience, if organizers wish, can be put at the service as a coordination desk for the G20 Innovation League in the upcoming years, as the proposal of the Honorable Minister Di Maio. In conclusion, the success of our startup enterprises depends on three ingredients: the consolidation of their business model and the timely industrialization of their proposal solution, the consequent expansion on international market, and the attraction of the required financial resources from venture capital. These three challenges, industrialization, internationalization, and financing, are interconnected, and the probability to succeed increase as if they are addressed and won together. Events like this G20 Innovation League wanted to help in this direction, and I wanted to wish to all participants, startup and venture capital, a very, very fruitful session. Thank you.
Thank you, President Carlo Ferro. And now we have the speech of Chief Executive Officer, National Fund for Innovation, CDP Venture Capital, Enrico Resmini.
Hello, good morning. Good morning to everyone connected or in person in beautiful Sorrento. Unfortunately, I could not be there with you today. A sudden flu struck me to bed a few days ago. So it's not COVID, luckily enough, but still I have to stay here in Rome. So sorry for this, but it's a pleasure to be here today with you. I'd like to thank the G20 presidencies for setting this Innovation League up. I'd like to thank the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Italian trade agencies, and CMEST, and all the partners that made this all possible. I believe the Innovation League is a kind of a unique opportunity for connecting the dots. Let me just be more specific. I think there is a first set of dots that we need to connect. It's talking about startups. It has been mentioned before, the overall world ecosystem of startups is literally booming. I think there is roughly been invested in the first 7 months of this year, almost $400 billion US, which is a huge amount of money invested in startups. We have 1 to 2 unicorns, which are announced every day at worldwide level. And I think we're just at the beginning of this importance of startups riding the wave of innovation and adoption of new exponential technology. This ride, I think, has been quite accelerated by some fundamental shifts that are happening at human level. The first one is clearly on the digital transition. More and more products and services are being used through digital platforms, digital interface, and this is deeply changing the way human beings are getting connected and using the services and products produced by our companies. The second shift is the green, what I would call revolution. This is something that it is a necessity for our world, but it implies a big change, a big shift in the way we consume resources, in the way we move, in the way we exploit the planet. The third is also extremely important. We have seen the importance during the pandemic. It's life science. Life science is adopting new technologies and allowing us to cure and put our citizens safe from viruses and all the other stuff. So I think these shifts are really changing the way we as human beings live in our planet. And startups are at the frontier of this change because they are agile in the way they adopt these technologies, in the way they propose solutions. But they are not the only dots we want to connect today. There is also another set of dots, which is very important. It's venture capital firms. In the past decade, we have seen the growth and birth of several thousands venture capital firms. The number is a high number. We roughly have worldwide 3,000 venture capital firms. These venture capital firms now have the need to be global, have the need to be connected worldwide. Why? Because the deals, the startups are more and more global deals, because they need to find and spot opportunities in every country. It's not anymore the time of few countries leading the way into innovation. Innovation is spread all over the world, and venture capital need to connect among them in order to make sure that the best deals are pursued. The last set of dots that need to be connected is corporates. We know that startups benefit from working with large corporations because they can exploit their services, they can exploit their sites, their customers, but also corporates need to work with startups. For example, I was looking at a report published by a consultancy in the recent months that says that investments in corporate venture capital by corporates has been increasing in the past 5 years on a yearly basis by 40% year on year. And, if you look at the Fortune 100 top companies, now roughly 75% of them have a venture capital unit. So I think, these three set of dots, startups, venture capital firms, and corporates, had the need to connect among them. And Innovation League, this first event, so important, is the way to connect these dots within an institutional frame. Now, the way the G20 Innovation League team has selected to connect these dots is through these 5 human major challenges. And let me just give you a number. We made the math. Across these 5 challenges in the past 18 months, roughly 70% of the total venture capital money has been invested across these 5 major challenges. So they are really important. They are really central to the investment activity, but also to the activity of startups. Within all this kind of changing and growing environment, Italy is playing out its role. In the past, we were behind in terms of importance and development of our innovation ecosystem. Thanks to the activity and the push and the drive of past government and the current government, I think in the past 2 years, there's been quite an effort to push the development of the innovation ecosystem. And as Minister Di Maio was saying in his opening remark, now we have a healthy ecosystem that, in the first 6 months has invested, the same amount above the amount that was on a yearly basis invested in 2019 and 2020. And, more and more startups are arising here in Italy. In the past 12 months, 3,000 new startups have seen, the activity. So there is something really going on, which is very interesting. Our National Innovation Fund, which I have the privilege and the honor to lead, is really instrumental to this growth. We now have reached 1.5 billion euros of assets under management, and we are investing on our Italian startups, on our Italian venture capital firms, and striking collaborations with international investors in order to make sure that Italy is on their radar screen when it comes to investing into innovation. We have currently already more than 150 startups in our portfolio. We have invested in more than 15 venture capital firms. So it's first steps, but it's really promising first steps. And we hope that through this Innovation League, From now onwards, Italy will be recognized as a great country where to develop startups, but also where to play, investments on very promising startups. So I'm really looking forward the following sessions, and I hope we will start from now onwards connecting our dots and making stronger networks at the worldwide level. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Enrico Resmini. And as we are building, as I told before, and our speakers make us understand a new ecosystem, we have some goals that are common, that are global goals, but we also need vision, and visions from many people who can inspire the way to reach the goals for all over the world and all over the people and country who participates to this great challenge. So I'm honored to present you our guest, former OECD Secretary General José Ángel Gurría Treviño, and his inspirational vision will talk us about the role of innovative technologies and startups in tackling global challenges.
Thank you, Minister Di Maio, for inviting me to give the speech today. It's about the role of innovative technologies and startups in tackling global challenges. I hope I'll be able to inspire you or maybe challenge you by suggesting simply that this is the most critical policy responsibility that we have today. Simple as that. Now, a key question to consider is what to do with, and indeed, what to do about technological progress. Well, a simple question, but the simplicity belies the importance. Actually, the way we answer this question will define the future of our society. Technological progress is there for the taking, is there for the making, is there for exploiting, is there for improving society, our standards of living. It's happening whether we like it or not. It's irreversible. It is inevitable. It is irresistible. The great challenge is how we adopt it, how we adapt it, how we use it, how we profit from it, how we leverage the enormous potential that it has. Now, technology can improve our lives, but it can also challenge us in many ways. In our work, 14% of the jobs in the OECD countries are likely to be automated. And about 1/3 of all the jobs, so 14% plus 1/3 is about 47%. That's close to half of all the jobs are going to be disrupted somehow. They're going to be changed. They're going to be modified. In our society, where the presence or absence of digital tools will determine our access to services and to opportunities. Also, in our ethics, where the use or misuse of information and personal data can undermine the trust, can actually destroy lives, livelihoods. Now let me focus on 3 domains that we're talking about here. The first of all is small and medium enterprises, SMEs. Italy is a country of SMEs. It's a country that has discovered how to manage best its SMEs and how to integrate them into global value chains. The second is startups, which I am going to say is one type of SMEs. Huh? And the third is cities. Cities. Now, let me start with SMEs. SMEs account for 60% of the private sector workforce, for about 95% of all the companies in OECD countries. But if you talk about emerging economies, then the percentages are even higher. SMEs also have much lower levels of productivity, lower levels of trade, and as a result, typically offer lower levels of salaries than their larger counterparts. However, despite challenges related to economies of scale, many SMEs that fully embrace the potential of innovative technologies are able to outperform larger competitors and to thrive. Now, we need to help the millions of SMEs around the world who are leveraging on these technologies, who need to leverage on these technologies, whose survival depends on these technologies. Now, COVID-19 showed just how important innovative technologies are. 50% of SMEs have increased the digital take-up since the crisis started, moving operations online to remain in business, to mitigate the challenge of the pandemic. And many of these are here to stay. You know, these changes are quite permanent. Because we made so much investment on these things, but because they work, they function, they are successful. Now, however, with the pandemic, there's been an acceleration of the digital transition in the SMEs, but they continue to lag behind in the adoption of the digital technologies. Now, the same old challenge inhibiting broader take-up remain in many of the SME cases. Even with the digital, with the pandemic and everything else, many of the obstacles, many of the problems, they remain. So for all those of you who are in the business of promoting SMEs, really the old problems are still here with us. Now, challenges, digital security risks, huge digital gaps, awareness, skills. Not only digital skills, but skills in general. Data culture, and of course, challenges in accessing finance and investment that hold them back in making what I call the digital leap, the digital big leap forward. Leap to higher productivity, leap to higher innovation, leap to higher wages, to higher well-being in general. The right policies can help them in making that leap. Now, are we talking about policies related to the pandemic? Yes, of course we are. Are we talking about the recovery? Yes, of course we are. But mostly we are talking about permanent, durable policies, including policies that address these long-standing challenges regardless of the pandemic, because the pandemic will be over, but the scars of the pandemic will still be there, and the problems will still be with us. That means deepening the existing policies, creating new sources of support, designing new approaches, new paradigms, putting in place policies that enable SMEs to exploit opportunities, to mitigate the challenges, and to face the pandemic, the problems of the pandemic, but mostly to integrate into global value chains. As I said, the Italians seem to have mastered this challenge. It means policies that enable SMEs to drive the green transition, which we cannot achieve without the SMEs. Why? Well, because in Europe, they account for around 2/3 of industrial pollution. So if we do not get the SMEs to be greener, then we will not achieve the green revolution we are looking for. It means policies that enable the SMEs to drive the green transition. As I said, now, because you are talking about, what did I say? 60% of the workforce? I said 90, 80, 90, 95% of all the companies. So basically, it's a universe we absolutely have to tackle. Now, it means policies that will boost the productivity, boost the resilience, boost their ability to drive inclusive growth. Now, while many of these policies will be about regulation, about red tape, eliminating bureaucracy, etc., the critical policies will relate to innovative technologies. This will be the key. We can eliminate bureaucracy, but if we do not incorporate innovative technologies into the process of SMEs, then we will not change them. And this is not just about SMEs creating these technologies. I'll come back to this, but it's about creating pathways of awareness, access to those technologies, which are the best suited to integrate into global value chains, which will help bridge the skills gaps. I said skills, but we're also talking about upskilling. We're also talking about reskilling. One is upgrade of the skills, but the other one is changing completely, moving from one sector to another sector of the activity. And that means moving the workforce also. Now, one that will help address the deficit of financial resources. How do we deal with the problem of finance? Here we have a very challenging issue. To adopt the latest technologies, SMEs need resources. And again, access to credit is crucial. However, in the wake of the pandemic, many enterprises now have significant debt burden. The bold, quick, unprecedented response of many governments was in the form of debt or guarantees. Now, this support, I have to say, saved millions of SMEs, but has created a legacy that needs careful management, not only to ensure their continued survival, but also to ensure that the growing levels of debt does not weigh them down, become a burden that is so heavy, to invest in new technologies that will drive and sustain the recovery. So, SMEs debt in, for example, in APEC countries, we usually talk about the APEC and about the startups and they increased by more than 7% year on year in 2020, the largest increase recorded since 2013. And in some countries, for example, like Peru, SME loans increased by 63%. I mean, you're talking about, this is a whole generation of SMEs now under the burden of much bigger debt. This means looking at measures that convert that support into perhaps grants or maybe equity. Typically, of course, governments are not going to be looking at thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands, maybe through development banks, maybe through the commercial banking system, etc. Now, governments can also participate, encourage, and provide incentives for SMEs to go technological as part of their COVID turnaround process. Procurement, obviously, is a very important way. Even the United States, they have this SME, procurement system, which benefits the SMEs and the startups. You're talking about ecosystems. It was mentioned here, the ecosystems that can support SMEs in embracing emerging technologies, the cloud, 3D printing, the Internet of Things, big data, blockchain, you have it, ecosystems that can provide networking, advice, support for the SMEs. When you're dealing with the regulatory agencies, for example, accessing finance, and also ensuring access to 21st century infrastructure, which is sometimes one of the biggest obstacles that we have. We are promoting them, we're sometimes even providing finance, but we don't have the necessary infrastructure so that they can thrive. Now, of course, international organizations can play their part. The OECD just created a new committee, dedicated, specialized committee on SMEs and entrepreneurship. So, we had a working group, and we thought it was so important to upgrade it to an SME full committee. Now, so that's about the SMEs. Now, let me talk about the startups. I warned you. I said the startups are a special type of SME. And so most, if not all, the challenges that I talked about the SMEs, they apply to the startups. But there are some differences when you talk about startups. Startups are the engines of growth. They are the creators of employment. They're the drivers of innovation. For example, before the pandemic, young firms represented 20% of all the business jobs. Okay, fine, 20%, that's fine. But half of the new jobs. So in the margin, it was crucial. It was absolutely crucial. They also generated half of the productivity gains. So it's difficult to understand the modern times without the startups as being an integral part. I still remember I was with the mayor of Tel Aviv in a visit to Israel as a Secretary General of the OECD, and he said, we were in Rothschild Avenue, he said, choose one building, any building. So I did. And then he said, choose a floor. So, any floor. He said, I did the third floor, whatever I did. So we went to the third floor of that building, and there were 7 startups in that third floor of that building, which I had chosen at random, And then they would go, he said, if you go to any of the buildings in this neighborhood, you will find 10 startups in every floor, in every building. Now, actually, I was told then that in those days, not too long ago, that there were more startups in Israel than there were in all of Europe. So I said, bravo for Israel, but how terrible for Europe. Huh? Now, when you tell me that there are about 12,000 startups in Italy, etc., so maybe you're catching up, which is good. But indeed, in many European countries, many of these startups were being created in sectors with relatively low productivity, accommodation, retail, construction. In France, for example, around 90% of all the new jobs were created after the financial crisis in activities that were below average in terms of wages. Close to 2/3 in Germany. The United Kingdom also. They were in low productivity activities. Because the support and the enabling environment for the high productivity, high growth, technologically driven startups was not working. Simple as that. After the last financial crisis, 2008, 2009, we did not get it right. We could not get it right. Now, we seem to be doing better. Now, remember, Dropbox, Uber, Airbnb, WhatsApp, Groupon, Pinterest, even Alibaba's Taobao were created, during times of crisis. And in most countries, business creations have already rebounded quite strongly. We can expect that in the wake of the current crisis, we will see a similar explosion in innovation. Not least because of the acceleration towards digital, which was forced upon us. But the idea is that if enabled, we'll be able to leverage on the intrinsic advantages, cutting-edge technology, nimbleness, the innovation, the adaptability in adopting new developments and technologies. So, how, if, challenging times, but also times of opportunity for those that are bold, but that are armed. You don't need just to be bold. You need to be armed with the proper tools. How can we enable them? How can we empower them? How can we give them the force? Well, efficient and effective access to finance. The ability to leverage intangible assets. To provide support and incentives for R&D. R&D. Innovation does not happen spontaneously. It has to be produced. Here you have the 5 sectors that you have prioritized for this particular conference, where it was said 70% or 80% of all the investment is in those sectors. So we seem to be on the right track. Then the awareness of support initiatives. What is there? I mean, we have to tell the people that there are these facilities. We have to let them know. We have to lead them by the hand and say, come, go to this guichet, go to this little office and then you will be supported. Or get on the internet and you will be supported. Better arrangements to support what I would call second chance entrepreneurs. One of the things that struck me a lot, and this applies both to Israel but also to the United States, is that it said, we never support in this incubator of startups, we never support anybody who has not failed at least twice. You say, what? In Mexico, you fail once, you have this black spot all your life, It goes with you. It's like a burden. It's a terrible thing. Well, a little bit in Italy, not so bad, yeah? So please. So university business collaborations. And then, again, skills. Did I tell you about skills? Yes, skills. Okay. Now, so how about the place? The place. Cities is where it's all happening. Now, in the world today, we are mostly in cities, 52% already. That includes in China, everywhere, you know. But in the OECD, which is our natural ambiance, we are 80% cities, 75%, 80%. So cities is where it is all happening. Therefore, the enabling environment provided locally, the tangible, intangible infrastructure, the networks, the technologies that allow commerce and ideas to flow and to be diffused, is absolutely critical. And smart cities are at the core of this, and or I have to say, should be at the core. If they are not, they should be. This is where it's happening. Over the past 2 decades, the digital solutions that underpin smart cities have proliferated around the world. But as a way to build more efficient, more livable urban environments, and never have digital technologies and innovation been so valuable to help cities navigate the crisis and to accelerate the transition towards a more sustainable, resilient future. Now, some cities, of course, have been using the momentum and the recovery and to put people back at the center of the digitalization. Remember, dear friends, this is all about increasing well-being. If it is not about, how do you say, benessere, see, benessere. If it is not about well-being, it's not worth the paper it is written on. In the end, it has to produce an increased level of well-being. Now, you have some interesting examples. Here, the city of Florence, for example, this so-called right to the network. Interesting, accelerating the digitalization to reach already 85% of municipal services, or like ensuring data privacy, security at the same time. But also, how do you stop the question of the digital divide, the distance between people, but also between cities. Now, so smart cities was largely supply-driven in the beginning. Today, more attention is paid to how smart cities can deliver better opportunities, better well-being for all residents. Now, the same enabling environment that delivers these goals matter, of course. What are we talking about? Imagine, security. Just a feeling of feeling comfortable, feeling safe, walking on the street at night. Inequalities, jobs, education, healthcare, mobility, energy, water. Waste. How do you deal with waste? housing, local taxation, civic engagement, digital infrastructure, or processes like the coordination between the national government and the regional government and the city governments and the local government, you know. So now, why did I not mention the obvious, which were the large companies with the large technological changes, etc.? Well, the reason is because they have all sorts of reasons why they are being pressured to adopt technological change. I am talking about those areas that need specific national policies to promote. I'm not talking about those that will take care of themselves in a way. Why? Because shareholders, NGOs, stakeholders, regulators, the stock market, the financial market, Wall Street, whatever, you know, the financial sector, the media, all will take care of pushing the large companies. These days, large companies have to be resilient. They have to be green. They have to be resilient, not only resilient, but they have to be inclusive. Ah, yes, that means leave no one behind. But they have to be and look like they are being. This is like, what was she's Caesar's wife, you know, that had to be, they had to be honest, but look like she was honest also. This is the same thing. Here, these companies have to be green, they have to be resilient, they have to be inclusive, but they also need to show that they are being such. So, in fact, they have an obligation to show how much of the above they actually do, lest they get a nasty response from the regulators, from the markets, or from the consumers. In fact, it's not a choice. In the case of large companies, it's a matter of survival. You know, many of the classical companies of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, are now gone because they did not update, they did not upgrade, they did not understand these rules. So think about it for a moment. What are we talking about? The digital revolution, information or disinformation, please, and the impact on democracy. This is part of the services. Trade, investment, migration, climate change, biodiversity, tax transparency, digital taxation, and of course, the pandemic, where we still have the problem of the pandemic. These are the challenges. They can all be enhanced, they can be promoted, they can be accelerated by adopting the most appropriate, the most challenging, the latest technological innovations. But remember, they are the instruments. They are tools. They have to be preceded by something in which you have a lot to say, which are the policies. So, if you put the policy needs and the tools together, then you could get the highest possible level of well-being. And in the end, as I said, that's what it's all about. Pre-COVID, during the COVID, and of course, post-COVID. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the Secretary General for his inspirational speech. And now let's go together a little bit deeper into the domains of our startups. So for clean tech, we are honored to have Kate Smage, Global Head Digital and Analytics, member of Global Board McKinsey and Company. So you're invited to join me. For Smart City and Mobility, Brian Colley, Global Leader for Automotive and Mobility, Boston Consulting Group. Artificial Intelligence, Vittorio Bonori, Expert Partner, Advanced Analytics EMEA, Bain and Company. Healthcare, you can sit. Healthcare, Akashai Agarwal, EU Head of Healthcare, Oliver Wyman. Iot and Wearables, Tim Good, Managing Director, Lead Talent and Organization, Human Potential Europe, or Accenture. So, okay. So, the first domain where we have to afford is what Europe focused very well with two colors that are green and blue. So green is the environment, the importance of having a clean ambient and all the challenges that we have for sustainability. And the blue is the digital world, how they are combined. So we can ask it to Kate Smage that we have.
Almost, folks.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me today. And I am super sad not to be with you in person, enjoying the Sorrento sun and being part of this amazing group that's going to bring inspiration, ideas, innovation, and hopefully a lot of impact together as you go through the day. So I am Kate Smage. I'm a senior partner based out of London, and I lead all of our capabilities around technology, around digital, around analytics and data for McKinsey. And I am both a little bit of a geek and also a passionate advocate for how we really think about breakthrough innovations in clean tech. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So if I just go forward, I think this is our time, right? And we all know, this is why we're here today, that this challenge is big. At McKinsey, we've had a bit of fun modelling what we think the global energy reference case needs to be. Now, this is a picture that effectively creates what the world energy system might look like through 2050, based on current trends and so on. So it's not a do-nothing scenario. The do-nothing scenario is far, far worse. It's actually quite a bullish scenario, taking into account the potential for renewable energy, EV adoption rates, and so forth. And what this tells us is that left to our own devices, if you like, this 1.5 degree pathway is not attainable, right? We're way off. It won't happen anywhere near fast enough. What we need is a 90% reduction. And my belief, our belief, is that this doesn't happen without some serious investment and collaboration around the technology innovations that can close that gap. So the good news, though, because I am an eternal optimist for those that know me, is that the greatest part of the abatement potential can actually be met without any new breakthrough technology required at all. And this is what this chart shows. And if you look at the numbers on the right-hand side for a second, 28% of the abatement potential by 2050 will actually come from what is already mature technology today. You might think of this as insulation technology, for example. We're all using it. We're using it at scale today. The next bucket, the blue piece, 32%, comes from technology that we've already adopted somehow, but it's nowhere near yet to the fullest extent that it could be. And I think electric cars is a great example of that. Still only 2% of cars sold last year. And yet we know that we've got to make a much bigger scaling of that technology in order to really have the impact that we need by 2050. The third bucket then is what I call proven technology, demonstrated technology.
but it's demonstrated on a small scale today, right? It hasn't yet systematically been scaled to the advantage that it needs to be. You know, so things like hydrogen blending, CCUS as well, carbon capture, use and storage. You know, we believe that actually by 2050, you're going to need about 125 times the amount of carbon captured relative to what the technologies do today. So we know how to do some of this, but it's not scaled systematically at the moment. And then the remainder is what I'll call R&D, right? We're still trying to investigate it. It's the hard stuff. It's renewables. It's energy efficiency and storage. It's waste and water management and many different forms of decarbonisation. That's where a lot of the R&D is going to close that final gap. But this notion is, you know, this notion of a lot of the potential already being there, it's already in our hands, we have the technology, I think is really exciting. And so I hope that today's startups will focus not just on the new stuff that we haven't done, but also on how you scale the existing technology that we have. Because the more challenging news, like frankly any technology transformation that we all live through, is that it's never actually just about the technology itself. In some ways, the technology is often the easy part of it. It's how we get the other analog stuff that sits around it. You know, many of the speakers before me talked about connecting the dots, right? The power of that ecosystem. How we actually get that to make sure that the technology itself is both wildly successful, but also widely adopted and scaled. And that's where the real challenge lies. So in many ways, it's not surprising, I think, that this is a group that feels the passion for investing in startups that can really start to do this. And I've just put a few examples here. You know, the past year, we've attracted $30 billion of investment in about 500 different startups from many, many different players in this space as well. You see here 1,000 different investment firms, including, you know, a number of corporate VCs as well. And what's interesting in these numbers is the deal volume is also up, right? So there were 50% more climate deals in Q2 of 21 than there were in the same quarter of last year. And also the deal size is increasing, right? We're getting bolder with putting money behind this. Series A was double what it was in the average size of a year ago. And growth investments have trebled. So this is an exciting space. So if anyone was not quite sure why you're here today, this is a good place to be. And we could look at many, many different startups in this arena. And sadly, we won't have time to do them all justice today. But these are the sort of 10 areas, if you like, that we at McKinsey are spending most time trying to understand. Because the notion of reaching net zero does require a paradigm shift, right? This isn't a little bit more of what we do today and a little bit more of incremental and try a bit harder. To get to the full use, full adoption, full development of clean technologies, we really need to get these 10 issues right. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do want to leave you with one thought as you think about what you're doing in these different spaces, or two thoughts. Thought number one is, please tackle the hard stuff. And I'm going to come back to that later. These are the hard things that we have to get right as a planet. But also think about the linkages between the technologies as well. Because what we often find is it's rarely one technology alone that solves this, that cracks the breakthrough. It's the power of colliding the different technologies together that really gives you that step up. So these are the 10. So let's look at a couple of examples. The first one I just wanted to throw out, again, in the spirit of, frankly, just inspiring and hopefully giving you some food for thought as we, as you do the various conversations through the day. But the first is of microgrids, right? These are energy communities. And they can really be thought of as a way of, if you like, organizing collective energy actions. And I'm a big fan of, if you look at any other sector, any other technology transition that has happened or is happening, putting the technology in the hands of the consumers, getting that ownership, that prosumer notion is often a way to really unlock innovation. Because as consumers, we're actually very good at giving feedback on what works and what doesn't. We're very good at tying different things together. So, you know, we'll all see different data on this, but certainly some of the data that we're looking at says that probably about 17% of wind capacity, maybe even 20% of solar capacity could be owned by energy communities by 2030. So this is a trend that is happening. And I like the notion here of how it brings together many different technologies and puts it in the hand of the consumer to really do something special. And look, it's changing energy regulation. It's a source of innovation of commercial models, you know, that kind of thing. So have a think about what you could do within an energy community. The second example is hydrogen. Now, hydrogen, you know, has had a good week. Yeah, I'm loving the fact that The Economist this week really majored on what the new hydrogen economy is going to look like. And frankly, honed in on the complexity of how to get this right, because there are a lot of tough, tricky, interrelated issues in this space. And we know that to enable the energy transition, we're going to have to grow hydrogen markets more than 6 times by 2050, right? It's a big amount of demand that could come out of this. Now, why is that? You know, it's a big part of the innovation unlock because it factors in how we're going to decarbonize the power system. It's great that we have electrification, for example, but if that electricity is not clean electricity, we're no better off in terms of how we think about it. Hydrogen is going to play a big role in that. When we look at the role it will play in aviation alongside biofuels, the way that we think about hydrogen-based ammonia for solutions in shipping, and anyone who's read Bill Gates's book knows how important the effects of shipping actually are in this whole thing. And then, of course, how we think about industrial decarbonisation as well, particularly for anything that is high temperature heat related, right? Cement being a great example. And then my third example, and this is one I just wanted to pick on because I like the notion of how J&J brought together many different technologies that we all use today in order to, in order to get this right. This is a plant in Sweden that J&J operates, which invested in a bunch of advanced controls with green installations in order to really think about how to move to its, frankly, first ever CO2 neutral plant. And, you know, there are some things here, you know, it took robotic applications you can see on the right under Industry 4.0 and got a 14% increase in equipment effectiveness. Great. And then they launched that alongside how to think about ammonia-based cooling systems to really make sure that the energy that they are creating is clean energy and so on. And you can see the impact on the right. I won't belabor the points. And I give you these examples really because, as I said earlier, what I want this group to focus on, I beg of you to do, is to think about focusing on the hard stuff, right? It's electricity storage, it's cement, it's fertilizer, and it's making the technology scale. And I'll give you just 4 examples here on the how, if you like, right? The first is new jobs. Many of the previous speakers talked about the notion of reskilling that is going to be needed here. We talk about 5 million net new jobs in the EU by 2050. That's 11 million that are going to be created, 11 million, and 6 million that will be lost. That's what the net number actually is. That is a huge reskilling challenge. Similarly, you know, the mobilization of green capital, this 28 trillion number, right? The investments that are going to be required in the EU by 2050. That's the equivalent of 25% of the annual capital investments in the EU today, 4% of EU GDP. These are not small numbers. Unless we can mobilize green capital to really work in favor of these technologies, they will not scale. Computing power is my third, and how you think about power capacity. In short, today's computational power is not going to be sufficient for the future needs that we have. A lot of the ways in which these technologies will work will require far higher computational power, and we need to be able to deliver that in a clean way. It's actually one of the reasons I get quite excited about the potential of quantum computing by even sort of 2027, which we believe will be about an 8 billion market by that point. And then finally, this notion of working together, right? Every speaker today has talked about it, whether it's connecting the dots, whether it's the power of the ecosystem. But this equitable access to clean technologies across the world, it's only possible if we work together to do this. So if you do, you know, one thing today, talk to each other, collide ideas, bring these different notions of public, private, corporate participation into this mix. So look, I hope this inspires you a little bit for the sessions that come later. I have really high hopes of what this group is going to do, not just this year, but in perpetuity in future years, to get some really major breakthroughs, not just on the technology, but on how we scale that technology and how we start to solve the world's hardest problems. So focus on the hard stuff and have a ton of fun today. Thank you.
So thank you, and we go to the second field. As we know, Italy will have on the 23rd of October in a global competition in Indianapolis an autonomous vehicle running in a competition. This is a great innovation, but we have to talk to understand what will happen in our cities according to green and blue with mobility and autonomous vehicle and how we will be more green in driving. So, Brian Colley.
Well, thank you very much. It is an honor to be with all of you here today. The automotive mobility industry is in the midst of the greatest disruption it has seen in well over 100 years. Can we get the slides to come up? Actually, back. There we go. So the automotive mobility industry is in the midst of the greatest disruption we have seen in well over 100 years. The opportunities are limitless, but change is never easy. If we would have been at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas 5 years ago, we would have all been led to believe that by today, we'd all be driving around in robotaxis. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Instead, the automotive industry is struggling with the very basics of manufacturing 101 as it navigates the broader semiconductor crisis. But with all these challenges, we can't lose sight of the opportunities before us. And the economics for change, they remain as compelling as ever. President Kennedy once said, "Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future." These are certainly chaotic times. But chaos breeds discontinuities, and discontinuity in turn creates opportunities. It creates opportunities for cities, for municipalities, for traditional players to reinvent themselves, but as importantly, it creates opportunities for dreamers, innovators such as many of you in the audience, to not only change the future of mobility, but to truly change the world. And we have no choice but to get this right. After more than 100 years of innovation, mobility has frankly failed. We have hundreds of millions of people in dense urban environments that have frankly been left behind. Mobility is not accessible, it's not reliable. Many have to take trips of excess of 90 minutes longer than those in higher income areas to access jobs. This lack of accessibility, this lack of reliability, holding many, many people behind from really realizing the promise of jobs and economic growth. Safety. It is just so incredibly hard to believe that here we are, after all the years of progress in mobility, more than 1 million lives are still lost annually due to traffic fatalities. 1.3 every year. That's the equivalent of losing a city such as Milan every year due to traffic accidents. It's an astonishing number, and it's a number that has to be fixed. It's a number that can be fixed. And we just heard a good discussion here talking about green tech. The global automotive industry today contributes 6 gigatons of CO2 into the atmosphere, accounting for 12% of total global emissions. We will not be able to realize the Paris Accords unless the automotive industry steps up to do its part. So it's not about just changing mobility, it's about changing the world. And I have confidence that we can actually do it. So why am I confident that we are able to do things now and the years ahead that we weren't frankly able to do over the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? Well, it really comes down to a convergence of 5 key forces. The first is AI machine learning, which we'll hear a little bit more about later on. The second is tech maturity. The reality is that you can do things when battery costs are $70 per kilowatt hour that you frankly couldn't do when battery costs were $200 kilowatt hour, or when the cost of a LiDAR drops from $100,000 per unit down to $500 per unit. We've made great strides on technological maturity with dramatic decline in costs. The third force is connectivity. we are a connected society. We have been for the last couple of years. It's only going to continue to grow here in the coming decade. Attitudinal shifts. Consumers are moving beyond a consumption economy to much more of a sharing economy. We've seen dramatic pickup in ride sharing, car sharing. People are now willing to do things, frankly, that they weren't able to do or weren't willing to do even just a few years ago. And we can't underestimate the importance of the regulatory pressures, the commitment towards net zero, and the incentives that is driving companies to finally drive change. So what will this new world of mobility look like, and how will it impact cities? A few key things. The first is we're going to move from gas guzzlers to electrified vehicles. By 2035, if you include mild hybrid, 95% of all new vehicles sold will be electrified, having a dramatic impact on our CO2 footprint. 100% of all new vehicles sold will be connected by 2030. Over-the-air updates will be the norm. And business models, new business models that I expect many of us to be talking about later today, will emerge, allowing the vehicle to move from a one-time sell to an ongoing subscription. Related to green tech, we have to move from single-use to circular, net zero production. It's not enough just to change the powertrain for a vehicle. We have to change how these vehicles are made. We have to change where they get the source of their energy. Back to the 1.3 million lives that are lost annually. Today, we've made great strides with active safety, with lane departure assist, automatic emergency braking. But today, those upgrades are limited towards premium vehicles for those who can afford to pay for them. Going ahead, that will migrate from a luxury to a common good. And lastly, as I talked about, for our dense urban areas, we are going to move from privately owned vehicles to sharing, much of it driven by the advancements in autonomous technology, with about 30% of all vehicle miles traveled by 2030, accounting for shared autonomous electric vehicles. So let me just dive deep on a few of these real quick. So first is on EVs. It was mentioned earlier, today EVs only account for about 2% of all vehicles sold. And frankly, the reason is because the economics today at this point in time simply aren't compelling enough on a total cost of ownership. But that is changing. Here by 2025, we expect battery electric vehicles on a total cost of ownership comparison to be advantaged relative to traditional gasoline engines. This is driven in part by the dramatic decline we expect to continue to see with lithium-ion batteries, getting down to less than $75 per kilowatt hour here in the next few years. But as importantly, it's not just the advancements in technology, but the cars, the offerings are actually better. We're no longer talking about boring, stale, functional vehicles that get you from point A to point B. We're talking about some of the most exciting vehicles on the market today that are powered by battery electric vehicles. We're talking about performance, we're talking about handling that are really attracting and exciting emotion in consumers that is driving so much of the change. We're also going to continue to see dramatic improvements in technology. The vehicle is moving from hardware to really being a software-defined vehicle, a new era of connectivity coming in. It's no longer about metal. It's about moving from metal to bits at scale. And that is the future of the automotive industry. If you look back at 2010, about 10 years ago, we're talking about just a couple kilobytes of data that can only be accessed at a service garage to get some performance diagnostics of the vehicle. But by the end of the decade, we're talking more than 2 terabytes of data per day coming off the vehicle. That is going to unlock so many opportunities that frankly aren't possible today. In the future, the vehicle will be sold and advertised as much about the software-defined features as much as it is about the look and feel of the vehicle. It's going to be about the user interface. It's going to be about the ability to mimic essentially a consumer electronics platform and to create opportunities to connect with people socially, to purchase online. It's going to be about safety. We see $26 billion annually being spent R&D by leading vehicle manufacturers to harness this opportunity. We expect by the end of the decade this market to be more than $150 billion. And for automakers, it's so key to their future. It's no longer going to be about a one-time product sale, but it's about going to be able to capture annual subscription revenue from software-based services. This is the future of our auto industry. And then autonomous vehicles. Clearly, some of the euphoria has waned the last couple of years with some of the challenges we've seen with solving this very complex math problem. That said, we can't lose sight that we have actually made real progress. We've made real progress on the technology. We made real progress on the algorithms. We're getting smarter. And by the end of the decade, autonomous vehicles will be an important part of the fabric of our communities in the most dense urban areas. We expect it to account for about 30% of vehicles miles traveled within the dense, most major urban areas. And that's going to be driven by a dramatic decline in cost relative to private vehicle ownership, relative to ride sharing. You've got to follow the economics. Owning and operating a vehicle in a major city in the U.S. today costs about $13,000 annually. If you can remove the driver, if you can make ride sharing available for 80 cents a mile, you're talking about a reduction on annual spend on mobility by about $5,000 a year. And you could do so without having to sacrifice with convenience. In actuality, you'd actually get more convenience because instead of driving in congestion, which we've all experienced and which we'll likely experience driving to the airport tonight, you'll be able to have that time back to you to connect with people socially, to connect with people for work. And again, it's important, though, to note, though, that this is something that is not going to impact all parts of society. The promise of autonomous vehicles really is going to be isolated to our most dense urban areas. We look to see about 30 to 40 cities in major geographies. Because there has to be the density of demand to make the economics work for fleets and for the autonomous companies to invest the assets. There have to be real pain points with owning and operating a vehicle. I mean, frankly, somebody who lives in Texas that doesn't have a neighbor for 10 miles, they enjoy their 2 pickup trucks. They don't need a robotaxi. So you've got to look where the pain points are. And lastly, you're going to see it emerge where we have relatively low complex operational environments. But as we look ahead, again, we can't lose sight, this will be hard. Change is never easy. And we're going to have progress. There's going to be times where we actually take a step back. But as we look ahead, and what I hope we'll see in a lot of the discussions today is really us beginning to coalesce around 5 key imperatives. The first I'll leave you with is we have to challenge everything. We have to continually attack and break apart the status quo. We have to reinvent business models. We have to reinvent operating models. We have to fundamentally challenge the type of talent we need to propel us forward, not looking backwards. Second, we have to strengthen resiliency. The move to new mobility is creating supply chains, creating new categories that, frankly, the automotive industry, the mobility industry is ill-equipped for. And we're seeing that this year on the semiconductor challenge, where more than 10 to 12 million vehicles will be lost production this year because of the challenge we've had with the supply chain. We have 70% of the future battery capacity coming from China. We have raw materials isolated in countries such as Democratic Republic of Congo. We have to develop resilience in our supply chains. Third, we need to build the infrastructure. The public-private sector have to come together to make upgrades. If you look at a city such as LA today, great strides in terms of EV penetration in the California market. The reality is the LA community, a good portion of the neighborhoods aren't equipped to actually support fast chargers. We have to align regulatory frameworks. The reality is today with AVs, if you had a commercial vehicle, you couldn't operate across many countries in Europe, go borders. You couldn't take a commercial vehicle from Long Beach to Norfolk, given the differences in regulatory frameworks across the various states. And lastly, we've got to find a way to fund the journey. For the traditional manufacturers, that's breaking free from a capital-intensive model, which has historically destroyed value. And for new players, such as many of you in the audience today, it's about how do you actually manage the transition from where we are today with a golden opportunity to a true commercialized opportunity. And the last point I'll leave you with is we cannot underestimate the threat of unintended consequences. Success is not taking thousands of people off trains, off buses, and putting them in single occupancy robotaxis. Success is not littering our streets and our sidewalks with bicycles or scooters. We have to find a way for the public-private sector to come together and drive a level of partnership and a collaboration that, frankly, we rarely see. This picture here, this is a picture from Chicago in 1911, where I'm from. And I can't help but laugh at this picture. You see trains, your rail cars, trolleys, you see horse-drawn carriages, you see cars, horses, pedestrians. You see chaos. This is not what we want our cities to look like. We want to harness the potential of new mobility to change the world. It won't be easy, but when we get it right, it's not about changing the industry, it's about changing society. It's about a safer, far cleaner world. It's about equitable mobility access and reliability for all. And it's about an engine for economic growth. So thanks for the few minutes. I look forward to meeting many of you today during the breakout sessions and talking about how today we can harness some of the energy and opportunities in the room to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you to Brian Colley. And we always talk about artificial intelligence, and we won't come back from this term, from the creation of this world, but sometimes we have to understand that it's wrong. Artificial and intelligence are not combining. What we have, what we are affording is the ability of being efficient and very much more efficient than human intelligence without being intelligent. So it's a divorce. Before the fourth revolution, we were intelligent and we were, as humans, the one who ruled in the world. But now there are some agents who are more efficient than us without being intelligent. This is to introduce Vittorio Bonori and the domain of artificial intelligence.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and I really feel proud to be here, and I really wanted to thank the entire organizing committee for the invite. I think there is no doubt that artificial intelligence is going to be the defining trend for the next 10 years. And this new technology has been defined a general purpose technology, which means a technology that is going to change and have a huge impact on our future. Likewise, electricity nearly 100 years ago, when this new technology basically affected every single industry. And in the same way, we expect artificial intelligence to have a transformational impact on every industry. There's no need to say that we all know about the potential implication for the future. We mentioned an important one before in the previous presentation about mobility, but also, just to name a few examples, the implication for robotics in the manufacture industrial services, or, for example, experience personalization for shopping. Think about e-commerce, for example, without mentioning the healthcare sector, where personalization in the care, in the treatments is going to be huge. But I also wanted to align with all of you with a definition of AI. There are many different ones, and this is probably one I decided to pick up. So artificial intelligence is basically the ability of a machine of collecting and receiving impacting signals from the external environment, and it's independently enhance function and the intelligence, up to a point where artificial intelligence might in some way replicate the human intelligence. And this is going to be one of the main debates for the future. What we have seen since now is basically what is called narrow AI, which is AI applied to very specific tasks. And but the future is going to be open to potential new application. There is a new definition called artificial general intelligence, and I believe we had an interesting claim from the recently awarded Italian Nobel Prize, who mentioned how we're going to see this evolution in the next 10 years. Let's focus for a while on the current state of adoption. We conducted a survey 3 years ago that has been repeated at the beginning of the year. So first of all, 60% of the companies who respond to the questionnaire are basically declaring that they have already embraced at least one case of artificial intelligence. But we can say we are still in the early innings, which means that it's not really scaled. So we haven't been able to scale this technology across many different applications. A second element regarding the use cases, what we can say in a nutshell, that basically we are moving into more operational cases, which means, just to name a few examples, think about pricing model or demand forecasting, basically automation applied to industrial sectors. But also we are moving from a cross-industry standard use cases into industry-specific. And I believe this is something we're going to experience later today with our startups. And finally, we also learn what is working, what is not. We have been able to identify the key elements, the key pillar, like, for example, the cost of the project, ease of integration, and also time to market. Interestingly, there is a new important element that most of the companies need to consider, which is basically data policy. So everything has to deal with data security and data privacy, of course. I also wanted to share with you just how this artificial intelligence market might look like in 5 years' time. So what are we going to see in the next 5 years? And the overall market size might exceed $800 billion worldwide, with basically 90% of this revenue converging on software. The remaining part is basically services, and with a yearly annual growth of around 20%. If you look at the fast-growing categories and industries, we can mention, of course, energy with an index of 123, healthcare, agriculture, and I believe this is an interesting one, telco, and, of course, education. In terms of technology, nearly 60% of this application will focus on deep learning, another 20% machine learning, and another 10 on NLP, so natural language processing. In terms of use cases, families, or way of application, we have a first important bulk, which is including visual analytics, process optimization, and also customer experience, as we mentioned before, and the second important bulk, where we see voice, speech, and also we'll say image recognition, predictive analytics, and also chatbots. But the reality is that nowadays only 25% of the AI projects are reaching or exceeding expectation, their objectives, and only 1/3 of these projects are completely scaled, which means that we still have important barriers that need to be overcome, and it was mentioned this morning before. So we had a look of multiple cases, given of course the visibility we have on many different markets, different industries, and we wanted just to isolate some of them. The first one is it's all about objectives. So setting clear objectives at the very beginning of the process is fundamental. The second one, we see many times very complex and long-term projects with a big bang at the end. Normally doesn't work. It's also important to remind how this technology should release short-term quick wins, giving confidence and trust to the organization. Overcomplication or artificial intelligence projects adding another layer of complexity to the existing legacy system, which is not helping, or even, this is something I really care about, which is underestimating the human factors. Humans are still relevant, I will say, and sometimes, we forget how important it is to provide, to maintain the confidence, in particular at the C-level, and also accessing to the right profile. There is a huge debate about the scarcity of resources around data scientists, data engineers, and so forth. But maybe I hope you will agree with me. We are not defining this test as failures. We are not failing. I think the entire system is trying to learn. So it's more about testing and learning many different options and routes. And we also wanted to distill what we call the golden rules. What should we do in order to get further success? As I said before, setting the right objectives at the beginning, deciding at the very early stage what is the way of adoption. Are we building capabilities inside, or are we partnering with external vertical solution? agile and fast way of working, which is fundamental. And this is another important one, fighting for good quality data. Good quality data are much more important than having a good technology. And we still see in many different cases how the quality of data at the beginning of the process is not where it should be. And finally, trying to design scalable and repeatable models. So this is my last chart before leaving you, I really would like to remind how important it is also to focus on the potential ethical implication of AI. AI is going to bring amazing success and transformation in our lives, but we also need to remember how important it is to evaluate and to assess the potential risk. And this is just a provocative final question, my final remark. Should data scientists embrace the Hippocratic oath like doctors? I'm not answering today, but I really wanted to leave you with this open question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vittorio Bonomi. Healthcare. Akshay Agarwal.
Morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here today, talking about something that's very topical right now, innovations in healthcare. It seems to me that my colleague and my former speaker had the same idea about starting with a quote from the same person, but this is thankfully a different quote. So let's start with a quote that I think is very, very applicable to what we've experienced in the last 18 months. It's one from John F. Kennedy. When written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, and the other one represents opportunity. Now, his interpretation wasn't exactly right. The second character, and sorry for the people who are Chinese native speakers here if I've also got this wrong, but represents something more like change point. In any case, the pandemic was a crisis for everyone, especially healthcare. Not enough beds, not enough doctors, no treatment, don't know how to treat the disease, etc. On every level, there was a crisis. However, it represented an opportunity for a change, a big change point. Things that didn't even seem possible 2 years ago were made possible. If I told you 2 years ago that we could construct a hospital in 2 weeks, would you have believed me? But we saw this the world over. We saw hospitals being erected at rapid pace. We saw treatments being developed at rapid pace. And that's what a crisis brings. It brings the need for change. So what change did we actually see when it came to the pandemic? We saw quite a few changes that, again, as I mentioned before, we wouldn't have seen before. The power of collaboration. The likes of ones that we'd never seen before in healthcare. For example, academia, regulators, health systems all came together to develop a vaccine program that is being rolled out today. And we're taking fruits of that today. The world is now hopefully back on track. And we're having this event today for that very reason. New technologies became a reality. These technologies had been around for many years before. But again, the pandemic paved the way for people to be able to adopt these technologies. Example here, the use of telehealth now is 20 times higher than before the pandemic. During the pandemic, it was 40 times higher. This shows the power of the ability to change and people to adopt and change the way that they actually do things. The next one is global interest in healthcare has boomed. When was the last time, and ask yourself this properly, you were at a dinner party and didn't talk something about healthcare? You all have done it. Everyone's now an expert in healthcare. Everyone knows about the virus, how it works, etc. When was that the last time that really happened, right? Investors are taking note. Healthcare used to be a defensive industry. Now, tech companies are booming. VCs are looking at healthcare as a way of innovation. And you'll see the new funding mechanisms going into healthcare, delivering more and more innovations in healthcare going in the future. Now, this is all great, but healthcare has major structural issues, and we all know these things. the growth of the population continues to rise. We're going to be over 10 billion people very shortly. There's going to be 4 times more over 65 people in the next 30 years. Most of the money going into healthcare will be used to treat chronic diseases. And treatment is getting more expensive day by day. Now, what does this all actually mean? What this means is that healthcare demand will continue to rise, and it will rise fast. There's no way that the global GDP will be able to keep up with the increasing rising in healthcare. And so what does this fundamentally mean for us? This means that we're going to have to reevaluate the way that we deliver healthcare. The model needs to change. There is no way around this. So if you look at this going forward, there's going to be 3 fundamental shifts and trends that will shape the healthcare industry going forward. The first one is healthcare will become more personalized, consumer-driven, and patient-centric. And I'll explain each of these in just a minute. The second one is big data and analytics will play an increasing role in healthcare. And the third one is digital technologies will become mainstream. Let's talk about the first one. Now, we've talked about this term for many, many years, patient-centric, etc., etc. But what does this actually mean for an individual? This means that currently what we are doing is our health systems are built around providers, regulators, and physicians. It's a one-size-fits-all model. Why should I receive the same treatment for the same condition as any one of you when I have a different ethnic background, I have a different profile, I have a different lifestyle? That does not make sense fundamentally. So what you will see going forward is a more tailored approach for healthcare being delivered around the individual than around the system. I'm going to use an example here of one company, and there's loads of these types of companies out there, 100 plus. It is a company that does bespoke monitoring solutions for patients with chronic care or chronic diseases. It gives you the ability to monitor your own disease, report to a physician when and how you need to be seen, rather than a physician telling you, please come back and see me in 6 weeks' time for this particular condition. You'll see more and more of these types of models being implemented in healthcare along the entire patient pathway. The second one is big data and analytics. Now, big data and analytics, there's a huge amount of data already available on each and every one of you when it comes to healthcare, lifestyle, social media, etc. But all of these data sets are siloed and individual. As we see these data sets being linked and more advanced analytics and increasing computing power, we'll be able to drive deeper insights into each and every one individual and therefore make treatments, etc., bespoke to you. Now, I'm going to use 2 examples here. One is the NHS. Obviously, I'm part of the UK and I can use these examples. The UK, when the pandemic hit, implemented what we call the shielded program list. It looked at each individual person in the UK, their lifestyle, their disease profile, where they lived, and therefore were able to implement a shielding program at rapid pace for every single individual client, every single individual patient. Letters were sent out to 5 million individuals telling them how to shield from the pandemic. This resulted, the estimate is this resulted in about tens of thousands of lives being saved in the height of the pandemic. The second one is pharma companies. Big data and advanced analytics is going to be used to reinvent the way we look at pharma and discover new treatments and drugs. Gone are the days when we are looking for traditional laborious mechanisms to find a new target for a particular disease and treatment for a particular disease. These new AI pharma companies are reinventing the way we look at this and able to identify drug candidates at rapid pace, right, with very good success rates. This will allow for faster and potentially more cheaper drugs coming to the market. The third one is digital technologies will become mainstream. And the digital technologies will not only be looking at point solutions, but how to augment the entire patient journey. I'm going to use an example here of Ping'an in China. Ping'an has a symptom checker app, where an individual can go and look at their symptoms and get some medical advice. If they are deemed to need some sort of intervention, they're able to go into one of these kiosks, which are scattered around the country, and look and see a physician virtually, who then is able to make a few diagnoses virtually and dispense drugs through the attached pharmacy. As you can appreciate, that is a very different pathway than any of us do today, of where we are going to see a physician separately, then we go to the pharmacy separately, then back to the physician, etc. Right? All of these three fundamental trends will have a massive shift in how we deliver healthcare. So you ask me, okay, this is fantastic. What will this look like for me as an individual? How will this really change? Let's take the example of Jane. Jane is a 40-year-old female. She essentially has all of her data collected. Advanced analytics tell her that this is the personalized prevention treatment plan for you, based on your phenotypic, genotypical, lifestyle, etc., social media data. It tells her this is how you remain healthy. Now, unfortunately, one day she gets some tummy pain, she gets abdominal pain. She goes to her symptom checker, and she puts in her symptoms. The symptom checker says, great, it doesn't seem anything serious right now. Hold on fire for a few days. Let's reevaluate the situation after a few days. Now, if she had got better, that would have completely avoided the need for a hospital visit, freeing up resources from other people who need it. Unfortunately, in this circumstance, it does not get better. And she goes back to her symptom checker and says, I still have the pain. The symptom checker then says, fine, I think you need some blood tests and an imaging test. Now, it automatically organizes those imaging tests and blood tests for her, and we already know that advanced analytics and machine learning, artificial intelligence can read those tests. In this situation, it diagnoses gallstones. Now, I won't go into what gallstones are, but they're not pleasant and they're quite painful. It recommends her for a procedure. The doctor reviews all the things, reviews all her notes, performs a procedure with AI and robotic instruments to improve her recovery. Following that, thankfully, the procedure goes very well. She goes home. Now, again, like I said before, she does not need to have regular follow-up like we had in the past. With tools, she's able to get a bespoke monitoring system for herself and report back to physicians if and when she needs to be seen. Now, this all feeds back into a targeted disease strategy. We know what causes gallstones. We know how to prevent it in the future. She therefore then now has new information on her along this patient journey, which allows a more targeted approach to her. So this may seem far-fetched, but what I want to iterate is all of these point solutions are available already in the healthcare market. It's how we link these up that will make a real difference. So I wanted to close off in the same way that I started off. Healthcare is at a change point, and it's how health systems will embrace the change that will determine whether this becomes a reality. I wanted to thank you for your time today.
The last one is Iot and Wearables. Tim Good.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. As you've just heard, my name is Tim Good, and I have the privilege of leading Accenture's talent and organization practice in Europe. Our purpose is to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity, and I spend my time helping organizations inspire their people as they change and grow. Today, I'm going to take a few minutes to explore the Internet of Things, or IoT for short, and wearables, but in a slightly different way, through a human lens. In our world today, change is constant, and it's complicated by some major life events that we simply can't predict. The crisis of the pandemic, economic downturns, social issues, and some, such as energy transition, that we actually can and we can get in front of and we can use as a huge opportunity. To have the agility, not just to survive, but thrive amidst constant change, organizations must embrace wholesale reinvention, transforming their organization digitally as well as culturally to unlock human ingenuity. We look to technologies like wearables and the vast Internet of Things to augment human performance. But we also know, through research that we've done in Accenture, that augmenting the human experience is equally important. Indeed, agile organizations that do this are the ones that will really thrive. Now, it's a given. The world of work and our lives have changed forever. Future-ready organizations must digitally transform as an imperative for survival. There's no doubt that the pandemic has fast-tracked the need for hybrid work and the digital reinvention this requires, but our research, laid out in our 2020 Global Digital Fluency Study, shows that just 14% of companies are digitally mature. The future of work requires people to be productive anywhere. 63% of high-growth companies have already adopted a productivity anywhere workforce model. However, only 30% of people are completely confident that they have the right technology and tools to be able to perform their jobs remotely. With the race to digital is the need for digital fluency. Workers need to access digital tools and training, but also leadership and cultural support to unlock their full potential and ingenuity. IoT and wearables are crucial resources for unifying a dispersed workforce, breaking down silos, moving us from reactive to proactive management by using predictive analytics and generating real-time responsiveness. Yet, we're now in a time when accountability shifted from an expectation of providing shareholder value alone to the CEO or leader in an organization being the one responsible for caring for their people, their customers, their suppliers, and the environment and the world around them in new ways. Workers are especially holding their employers to account to new standards, and leaders must show up in different ways to leave their people better off. So as we look to technology to enhance human performance, business and government leaders are accountable for the experience and well-being of their people at every turn of a transformation. Now, according to some research that I'm very proud of, and we spend a lot of time looking at in Accenture, organizations must think and rethink their people metrics and manage the human experience around 6 dimensions to truly maximize their people's human potential. And you can see these 6 dimensions on the slide in front of you. Emotional and mental well-being, relational, physical, financial, purposeful, and employable people do far better in business and do far better in life. Taking care of business by taking care of people is how to build a sustainable organization. However, what we found is that currently just over a little of half of workers today feel that their companies actually leave them better off. We found furthermore through our research that 68% of senior executives believed that they were creating an empowering workplace environment, but only 36% of workers, the real people on the ground, agreed. Today, workers and consumers alike are demanding a new style of leadership. All eyes are on business and government leaders to create workplaces that are sustainable and equitable for all of their workers. And workers have very high expectations of how organizations will lead responsibly post the crisis, with 69% expecting companies to behave more responsibly and equitably than before. Approximately 1 in 2 workers agree that ethical, sustainable, and moral values that a company holds will become more important to them after the pandemic. And future-looking organizations are transforming from an economic institution to one that is human-centered and responsible. Now, to IoT, I'd like to share in the interest of time just 2 examples of how the Internet of Things and wearables have augmented people performance and experience. In my first story, a large automotive manufacturer improved the efficiency of a challenging industrial task through augmented reality technology. At one of its plants, and I see my good friend here nodding his head, in the assembly line, workers had to complete a number of very intricate tasks in tight spaces in the final stages of production. Technicians were moving backwards and forwards between the assembly station, where they did their work, and an offline computer display to obtain work instructions, a really inefficient process that also had terrible ergonomics. To solve this, new connected worker technology utilizing upskill skylight and smart glasses was deployed. Adapting step-by-step assembly instructions into Skylight gave line technicians hands-free access to instructions at the point of assembly and improved the time to efficiency of new workers. This also increased overall employee comfort, safety, and satisfaction by reducing their ergonomic stress. And the cost of implementing Skylight and smart glasses was recovered for the business within 1 year. Another story about boosting safety and performance comes in the field of oil and gas, where we as an organization helped a major oil and gas super major locate and provide relevant information to thousands of workers within moments of an emergency through combined analytics. Oil and gas refineries are among some of the world's most dangerous environments, and this company recognized that working conditions at one of its environments carried serious downstream implications for worker safety. Working together, we developed what we called a digital Watchman, a solution that improved the tracking and management of the refinery's thousands of highly mobile workers. This level of analysis and insight reduced mobilization by 30%, improved billing accuracy, and enabled mustering in an emergency within 60 minutes of an event. During a recent site-wide alarm, this organization used the platform to determine the location of 4,500 workers in just 60 seconds. The efficiency gains were huge for the business, but also really improved worker safety. Now, in closing, we can't ignore the risks that come with leveraging the Internet of Things and wearable technologies. We know that these resources come with privacy and data security risks, and we heard about some of that in the discussions we had earlier. But we must also look at the human side of risk, risks that affect us psychologically and our well-being. Organizations embracing physical technologies must consider if they create a sense of encroachment. Workers may worry about the use of personal data tracking in their performance as workers, and they may fear that organizations are using tools to weed out poor performers as much as enable high performance. We are living in a time of deeper scrutiny of brands and their individual leaders. Both must walk the talk. Internal culture must match the values of an organization and those that it publicly claims. Trust, safety, and inclusion are critical through a thriving culture in any organization. Leaving people better off, taking care of people mentally, physically, relationally, and so on, is not only the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do for any business or organization. Even amid weak economic growth, weak GDP growth, companies that leave their people better off can see revenue gains of 5%, and just imagine what that would be like in more stable economic times. So the question I believe every future-looking leader should ask when digitally transforming their organization is putting your people at the center of change? Are you doing that? As we look at all the wonderful, innovative ideas many of you will present today, this afternoon in our sessions, I would encourage all of us to explore that idea further. Does this device, this solution, this platform, this IoT build trust, support mental wellness, enhance autonomy, and create physical and/or psychological safety? Technology is innovative when it frees people to innovate. Future-ready organizations can and should enable their people to be productive anywhere. They go a step further in their reckoning and ask, are we safe anywhere? Are we supported anywhere? And are we connected anywhere? Thank you very much for listening to me today, and back over.
Thank you to all our speakers. So now we know more about the fields of the challenge. The first section of our day stops here. You will hear a voiceover with the indication for reaching your pitch session, and then we will meet here again at 3:45. Good lunch and good pitch.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated where you are, please. We are going to leave the room in groups, in small groups. So please wait in your place and wait for Ministry Di Maio and institution to leave the room. Thank you for your patience. Please, if you want to launch the video and wait a few minutes. And please, if we want to wait, the institution, Ministry Di Maio, thank you for being here today. Iniziare a uscire.
Poniti per la cosa, perché sennò non ti si filano.
Anche il ministro, devo dire io al ministro. Please be seated, wait for our guests to leave the room, and we will leave the room in small groups. Thank you for your patience, for security reasons.